This is my entry for the Literotica Summer Lovin' Story Contest 2025. I had such a blast writing my story for last year's contest that I just had to take another swing at it. I hope you enjoy. A big thanks to Todger65 for his editing work like always. Cameron Birch stared at the lightly painted canvas mounted on the easel, tapping her paint brush against the palette in her left hand, as her eyes darted between that and the view of Blue Pine Lake, which was visible from the back deck of the cabin. The blue sky was dotted with a parade of cumulus clouds, which glided over the calm waters of the lake's surface, and the gentle, warm mid-July summer breeze rustled the leaves of the tall maple tree, which stood on the right side of the backyard, along with her blonde hair, which fluttered gently over her shoulders. She had already painted in the blue sky, the gradient of which became lighter as it approached the center of the canvas. As Cameron mixed the white and gray colors together on the palette, she looked at the canvas once more. Just as she was about to place the paint-soaked bristles of the brush against the canvas, the motivation to paint in the rest of the sky evaporated like water on hot asphalt. The creative juices that had flowed through her mind just moments ago had gone empty without warning. Cameron lowered her right hand and placed the brush in a cup of cleaning solution, which sat on a small wooden stool to her right. She looked at her work so far and tried to visualize how she wanted the painting to look, along with looking at a drop of blue paint that stained the sleeve of her yellow shirt. She tried in earnest to jumpstart the process again, but it was useless. "Not today, Cam. There's always tomorrow." She closed her eyes. Cameron grabbed the unfinished painting and walked back inside, leaving the easel standing on the porch. She placed the canvas onto the dining room table next to the kitchen. She then cleaned off the palette in the kitchen sink before drying it off with a paper towel and leaving it on the countertop. It had been 2 days since Cameron arrived at the cabin. She had taken a 2-week vacation from her job working as a graphic designer at Invoke Creative in Minneapolis. Lately, she felt that her work had lacked the spark she once possessed. Cameron had hoped that an extended getaway would solve the issue, but so far, she had no luck. She sat down on the couch in the living room of the family cabin. Although calling it a family cabin would be a bit of a stretch, considering the current circumstances. The cabin was built by her grandfather, Leroy Jarvie. Born to finish immigrants in the heart of Minnesota's Iron Range, Leroy was a hardworking lifelong miner and lived his whole life in northern Minnesota. Located about 10 miles north of the nearest town of Corsica, Minnesota. Leroy first built the cabin in the late 1960s, with additions to the structure being added in the late 1970s and early 1990s. By this point, it was less of a cabin and more of a house. However, the real reason why it wouldn't be considered a family cabin is because the children of Leroy were currently locked in a legal battle to determine who would inherit the property. Almost immediately following Leroy's passing the previous year, the entire family argued about what would become of the property, since there was no will to be found. This game of attrition only took place amongst the adults as they fought in court over the estate of Leroy, on the condition that the cabin be maintained. This meant that the kids could enjoy all the amenities of the cabin. Cameron sat on the couch and pulled out her phone. She scrolled through her social media feed and sighed deeply. She knew that her mom and dad, Patricia and Steve, along with a couple other aunts, wanted to sell the property for a hefty profit. On the flip side, her Uncle Lance and Aunt Karen wanted to keep the cabin within the family. As for Cameron, she loved it here. All the memories she had growing up here, plus the views of Blue Pine Lake, were so beautiful that it made one forget the struggles of daily life. She set her phone down and looked out at the deck, towards the lake. Her parents and aunts, as much as she loved them, were incredibly stubborn. They couldn't see the sentimental value of this place. No amount of money could ever cover what this place was truly worth. Suddenly, Cameron heard tires crunching the gravel outside the front door. She sat up as she heard a car door open and shut. It was unusual because, as far as she knew, no one else was supposed to be there. The lock to the front door clicked, and it swung open. Just then, a man's voice called out, "Hello, is someone here?" Cameron's heart nearly skipped a beat. She recognized the voice instantly. It was her cousin, Finley Jarvie, the youngest son of her uncle Lance and Aunt Karen. He was called Finn by most of the family, while Cameron had a pet name for him, Finny. "Finny, is that you?" Cameron stood up and excitedly walked to the doorway. As she rounded the corner, she saw Finn standing there with a large duffel bag over his shoulder. "Hey Cam, long time no see." Finn brought Cameron in for a hug with his free arm, and she returned his embrace. Cameron looked up into his blue eyes. He was at least a head taller than she was, and had grown a light beard on his square chin. His wavy brown hair covered the upper half of his forehead. "What are you doing here? I didn't think anyone would be showing up," Cameron asked him. Finn smiled. "I accepted a job with the DNR as a park ranger. Got tired of the rat race and decided to have a midlife crisis at the ripe old age of 27. Of course, this was Finn's way of saying that he needed to get away from his old life in Minneapolis. Cameron knew the reasoning behind this, but said nothing. "Why don't you put your bag in the spare master bedroom and come join me on the porch for a beer? I'm just cleaning up from painting earlier," Cameron offered, to which he accepted. She retrieved 2 tallboy cans of grain belt from the fridge and sat in a lounge chair on the porch, which overlooked the lake and backyard. Finn came out, sat next to Cameron, and took a can from her. He cracked open the can and took a gulp. Nothing like a cold beer after a 3-hour drive. Finn exhaled as he set the beer down next to him. "So, you got a job with the state, eh? You stick with them, and you're set for life." Cameron giggled as she drank from her can. Finn nodded. "Yeah, plus I got tired of looking at spreadsheets all day. That and, well, you know." His face became dark as he looked out at the lake. Finn was talking about the tragic death of his fiancée, Megan, who had been unfortunate enough to be caught in the crossfire during a shootout while she was at a work conference in Atlanta 2 years prior. Cameron nodded and placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's okay, Finn. I understand completely. Did you want to talk about it?" Finn stared off towards the lake and shook his head. "No, there's not much else to be said. She's gone, and well, I've learned to accept it." As Cameron watched him take a sip of grain belt, his tone of voice suggested that it was still somewhat of a sore subject. She quickly apologized and changed the topic. "So, tell me about this new gig of yours, Mr. Park Ranger." Cameron looked at him. Finn's demeanor changed quickly. "Well, I had just gotten off a 12-hour workday at the office, absolutely hating my life, and decided to look online for anything that seemed better. Suddenly, a job posting for a ranger at Pioneer Vista State Park appeared on my search results." "Oh nice, that's like, what, 15 minutes from here?" Cameron asked as she leaned forward. Finn nodded his head. "Yep. So, I looked at the job requirements and figured I had nothing to lose. So, I applied for it, and a week later, I told management to kiss my ass because I was leaving." "Knowing you, you probably told them to actually kiss your ass." Cameron laughed. Finn did a side eye. "Maybe." They shared a laugh before Finn asked Cameron about what she was up to. "So, still designing ads for dog shows?" Finn wryly asked. Cameron rolled her eyes. Very funny. But yes, I'm still with Invoke Creative, although I'm taking a 2-week vacation to get away from it all and get my creative juices flowing again. Judging from the canvas lying on the kitchen table, it's working out quite well for you. Finn was referring to the painting, which she lost the motivation to do earlier. Yeah, I just don't know what's wrong with me. I used to be full of ideas that I had trouble keeping track of them. Now, whenever I pick up a paintbrush or open Photoshop, it just vanishes. Cameron looked out at the lake and sighed. Finn placed a hand on her shoulder. Hey now, you're an incredibly talented artist, and don't let anyone else tell you otherwise. She reached up, squeezed his hand, and looked at him with her blue eyes. Thanks, Finny. Do you mean that? He nodded. You're the best artist I know. You've got this, Cam. I'm probably the only artist you know. Cameron stuck her tongue out at him. After they had finished their beers and headed inside, Cameron helped Finn bring in the rest of his belongings into the cabin. It turned out that Finn had canceled the lease on his apartment and had loaded everything he owned into his SUV, except for the bed, which he had given to a friend of his. While Cameron had been looking forward to 2 weeks of solitude, the arrival of Finn was a very welcome one. Finn was a few months older than her, but they had been close growing up, since they were the youngest of their respective siblings, a bond which didn't go unnoticed by other family members. Cameron's oldest brother, Brian, used to tease them constantly growing up as to when they were going to get married. Although they went to different schools down in the Twin Cities, they would use every opportunity to hang out with each other, especially after they had gotten their driver's licenses. Yet, they drifted apart when they started college since they were going to school on different sides of the country. Cameron, a talented artist, headed out east to the NYU Tisch School of the Arts, while Finn attended the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, like most kids did in suburban Minneapolis. Even though they had moved back to the Twin Cities after college, they never took time out of their schedules to hang out with each other like they used to, especially after Finn had met Megan. Now here they were, together at the cabin again, just like days past. After the third trip to his SUV to remove his stuff, Finn tossed one of his duffel bags onto the roof of his car when he looked up, and something caught his attention. What's that? His focus was on a cork handle that stuck out from an open space in the garage ceiling. Cameron looked up, and a big smile came across her face. Oh my God, is that what I think it is? She walked over to the open space and turned to Finn. Boost me up. Finn walked over, knelt, and cupped his hands together, prompting a head shake from Cameron. I'm going to fall on my ass if I stand on your hands. Grab me by the legs and lift me up. Come on, just like how we used to steal Grandma's cookies from the countertop when we were little. If you say so, shorty. Finn joked as he got behind Cameron, wrapping his arms around her legs at thigh level and lifted her up. As she reached up, he was eye level with her ass, which was contained within a pair of gray yoga pants that she was wearing. Though he wouldn't admit it to anyone, Cameron had a fantastic-looking ass. As she struggled to grab the cork handle, she accidentally nudged Finn in her face with her butt as she wiggled about. Sorry, Finny, I almost got it, she called out. Finn steadily maintained his balance and cracked a joke. Yeah, just try not to fart in my face while you're up there. Oh shush, just a little more. Got it? Cameron shouted as Finn gently set her down. She proudly held up what she had grabbed from the ceiling alcove in her right hand, an old cork-handled fishing rod. Wow, that's Grandpa's old fishing rod. He used to teach me how to fish with that back when I was little, Finn said in awe. Cameron examined the fishing rod. Yeah, I remember him trying to teach me, but I could never seem to get the hang of it. She slumped her shoulders and dropped her head. The regret of never being able to learn how to fish with her grandpa weighed heavily on Cameron. Want me to teach you? Grandpa taught me his technique, and it's not like you've got anything else better to do. Finn held out his hand and smiled. Cameron appeared apprehensive. Are you sure? If you had any plans, I don't want to be a bother. Finn shook his head. What plans? I don't plan on going anywhere for a couple of days, plus I've got a week before I start my job. Help me find Grandpa's tackle box and we'll head to the dock. Finn retrieved their grandpa's old tackle box from the closet of what used to be his old bedroom and made his way down to the dock. As he made his way through the backyard, he noticed the old pontoon that belonged to his grandfather covered in a blue tarp. Finn had many fond memories of him and Cameron going out on the lake with it, and it pained him to think that it was soon going to be sold. Shaking those bad thoughts aside, he stepped onto the light brown wooden deck, where Cameron was waiting for him, her arms folded behind her back as she twisted her upper body in excitement. So glad that you joined us, Miss Birch, Finn said as he carried the rod and tackle box onto dock. Cameron let out a giggle. Well, as you said, you got nothing else better to do, so show me what you got. Finn opened the metal tackle box and grabbed a vibrant orange and green feathered lure, which was shaped like a badminton birdie. The stems of the feathers came together under a metal cap with painted-on red eyes, and on the bottom of the lure was a hook hidden inside of the feathers themselves. Aren't we supposed to have bait? I don't think the fish will go for that, Cameron said as she watched Finn attach the lure to the end of the fishing line. Finn shook his head. Nope, Grandpa never used worms, minnows, or leeches. Said that anyone who relies on bait to catch fish shouldn't even be allowed to hold a fishing rod. Ha ha ha, that does sound like something he would have said. Cameron giggled as she watched Finn approach the end of the dock, holding the fishing rod in his right hand. He turned to look at her. And you'll see why after I'm done teaching you. Watch and observe. Finn drew his arm and wrist back until the fishing rod was pointed at a reverse 45-degree angle. He then suddenly threw his arm forward and flicked his wrist as Cameron watched in awe as the colorful lure went flying outwards towards the blue water, before hitting the surface of the lake with a tiny splash. Wow, how did you do that? That went so far out. Cameron mused in awe as Finn smirked at her. It's all about technique. Part of it is how to cast it out, and the other is about knowing when to unlock the bail. Cameron gave him a confused look. The what? Finn tapped on the thin, arched metal piece attached to the reel. The bail is what locks the spool or line in place. If you hit it at the right time, the lure will go flying. Just then, the tip of the rod bent downwards slightly. Finn shouted in excitement as he pulled the rod back and started to bring the lure back towards the dock. We got a live one, Cam. Cameron clapped with glee and jumped up and down. Come on, Finny, you got this. As the lure neared the dock, the two cousins could see the silhouette of a fish just beneath the water's surface. With one final pull of the rod, he drew in the lure and pulled out a small-looking fish. The fish with green scales and black vertical stripes thrashed in midair as Finn brought it in for a closer look. As he held it up, Cameron remarked, "Looks a bit too small to eat." That's because it is. Plus, I'm not too fond of perches, at least the ones here in Minnesota. If you go into Canada, though, they're absolute beasts. Finn said as he gently grabbed the perch below the gills and undid the hook from its mouth. He then knelt and gently placed the fish back in the water, where it quickly swam away from the dock out towards the lake from where it came. Think you're ready to give it a shot? Finn turned around and held out the fishing rod. Cameron approached with apprehension before grabbing the cork handle with her soft hand. She turned so that she was looking out in the lake and took a couple of breaths. "Just like you did," she said out loud as she drew her arm and wrist back. Finn was watching her and raised her hand. "Hold up, Cam. Try spacing your feet apart just a little bit." Cameron looked down at her white and pink running sneakers and moved her feet apart a few inches, while still holding the rod in an upright position. She then moved her arm back while keeping her wrist in place before looking at Finn. "Like this?" she asked him. Finn shook his head. "Nope, not like that. May I?" Cameron nodded her head, and Finn walked up behind her, lightly pressing his chest into her back. He grabbed the rod and pulled it back slightly. "Loosen up your wrist. Otherwise, if you try to cast it out, the lure is going to drop onto the deck," he said as Cameron relaxed her wrist. Cameron, however, felt light tingling all over her body. Finn was no doubt a very handsome man, and he had filled out quite nicely since she had last seen him 3 years ago. With his larger form pressed against her back, a small part of her became excited. "Then you cast out," she heard Finn say. She shook her head, having gotten lost in her own thoughts. "What was that? Sorry." "It's all right, Cam. Put your arm into this position like you are right now. Throw your arm and wrist forward. Hit the bail when the rod is angled in front of you. Then it should cast out," Finn said as he stepped away from her. "Okay, here goes." Cameron stared out at the lake with a look of determination. With a quick motion, she tossed her arm and flicked her wrist forward, making sure to hit the bail when the rod was in front of her. Much to her delight, she watched as the lure sailed into the air and out into the lake before making a light splash about 30 feet in front of them. "Holy crap, I did it, Finny." She jumped up and down on the deck as she held the rod in both hands, making sure to set the reel as she shook in excitement. Finn clapped his hands loudly. "Look at you, you're a natural at this." Cameron giggled as she grasped the cork handle with both hands, making sure to set the handle, thus not letting the lure drop to the bottom of the lake. "I still can't believe I did it. It was so easy," Cameron said as she smiled at Finn. "Well, sometimes you just need the right teacher." Finn laughed as he tousled her hair. Before she could make a retort back at Finn, Cameron felt a tug on the line, and she let out a light yelp as she involuntarily pulled back on the rod. "Oh, I think I got something," she shouted. Cameron listened intently as Finn instructed her on reeling the fish to the dock. Things like what position to hold the rod, when to let up on the reel, when to not pull against the movements of the fish. This happened for about a minute, until finally they could make out the silhouette of a rather large fish just beneath the surface of the water. Grabbing the fishing net, Finn moved it under the fish and brought it above the water. "Goddamn, Cam," Finn said in excitement as a giant green fish with a black ridge fought in vain against the confines of the net. Cameron smiled with glee. "So, is this one good to eat?" "That depends. You feeling like walleye tonight?" Finn looked back with a raised eyebrow. Finn had run into town to grab some shore lunch breading mix for the fish. While Cameron was excited to eat the spoils of her catch, she had not anticipated that the cleaning of the fish would be as messy as it ended up being. They sat at the dinner table, the rays of the orange sunset shining through the semi-open blinds next to the dining room table. Cameron took her first bite, and she immediately fell in love with Finn's cooking. "Oh my God, Finny, this is so delicious," she said after she took her first bite. Finn took a sip from his grain belt beer can next to his plate and smiled. "Glad you like it. One of my roommates in college, who is from this part of the state, used to cook for us whenever he went fishing. The recipe I'm using is his own." Ooh, is there a secret ingredient? Cameron asked as she took another bite from her fork. Finn held up the tallboy beer can, swung it from side to side from the top, and grinned. You're looking at it. Cameron giggled as she and Finn continued to eat their dinner. As they were just about finished, Finn asked about the creative difficulties she had been experiencing. So, this creative block that you're currently dealing with, how long has it been going on for? Since the end of March, so about 3 months now. The projects I've gotten are a lot better than the infamous dog show poster, but it's like any motivation I end up scraping together just disappears. Cameron sighed as she placed her fork on the now empty plate and took a sip of her beer. Finn took his last bite of fish and swallowed. Anything happen around that time? New manager, asshole coworkers, relationship troubles? No, none of that. I haven't seen anyone for about 8 months since I broke up with Wesley, but the split was mutual, so there's no bad blood between us. I just can't put my finger on it. No matter how hard I try to get myself motivated, nothing seems to work. Cameron huffed as she looked up at the ceiling. Finn watched intently as he finished drinking his beer can, setting it down on the polished hardwood table as it made a light clanking sound. And you've been trying to find this motivation since then? He finally asked. She nodded. Every single day. Then don't, Finn shrugged his shoulders. Cameron tilted her head at him with a look of disbelief. Excuse me. Finn held his hands up in front of him. Just hear me out on this, Cam. All right. She nodded as Finn began to explain. Look, I'm not a psychologist or anything, but I know if I force myself to do something, it never pans out. If you keep forcing yourself to find that spark, it's not going to happen. Cameron raised an eyebrow. What are you trying to say? What I'm saying is that you need to take it easy and relax your mind. You came up here to regain your creative mojo, right? Finn asked Cameron as she nodded in affirmation. You've still got, a week and a half until you head back to the cities. Just take a day or two to enjoy what's around you. I mean, shit. When I got the offer to become a park ranger up here, my motivation was that I'd be living amongst the beauty of the Northwoods that we both grew up with. What I'm saying is take it all in, and I guarantee you that you will be back to your old self. Finn said, as he leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. Cameron looked down at the floor and sighed. All right, Finny, I trust you enough to try it out. I was hoping you'd say that, because I'm thinking of heading to Pioneer Vista tomorrow for a bit of hiking action. You know, get a feel for my new workspace, if you will. Wanna tag along? Finn asked her. Sure, I want to give this idea of yours a try, so why not? Cameron smiled. Finn smiled. Cool, hope you brought some good shoes because there's lots of trails there. Cameron giggled as they cleaned up the kitchen. As she helped Finn load the dishes into the dishwasher, Cameron couldn't help but feel a sense of comfort with his presence. She had been looking forward to a couple of weeks of solitude in the Northwoods, but Finn being there just made her happy. Hey, Finny, she asked as he started the dishwasher and turned around. What's up? He asked. Cameron stepped forward and embraced him, wrapping her arms around him and pressing the side of her face against his chest. I dunno, I just wanted to say that I'm glad you're here. Really, I am. Finn returned the gesture by hugging her. You sure about that? I did kind of interrupt your vacation and all, he said jokingly. She looked up at him. Of course I'm sure. You're pretty much the only person in the family I can tolerate. The feeling is mutual. You also don't have the pleasure of dealing with older sisters. Finn laughed as they took a step back from one another. Cameron placed her hands on her hips and laughed. I'd rather have older sisters than older brothers. I swear, I feel like the only reason why I was born was that Brian and Patrick could terrorize someone. Well, to be fair, They pretty much give everyone in the family a hard time, even Grandpa Lears. Finn laughed as Cameron joined in. I still remember the time they gave Grandpa shit over his fishing hat while they were out on the pontoon. Grandpa Lear put them in their place real quick when he told them. Cameron changed her pitch to match that of their grandfather. You know, boys, if you spent as much time making Cameron's life a living hell as you did into working on your fishing skills, you wouldn't need me to show you the ropes. Finn erupted in more laughter as Cameron finished her story. It was one of the few times that I had seen Brian or Patrick not have some smartass follow-up remark, because Grandpa was one of the few people who could put them in their place. After they cleaned up, they spent the next hour catching up before retiring to their rooms for the evening. The cabin itself had a total of 5 bedrooms after their grandfather had added more to accommodate large family gatherings. Finn decided to take one of the master bedrooms, while Cameron stayed in the other one since she didn't want to be confined to just a simple twin-sized bed, as was the case with the other bedrooms. As Cameron lay in bed sleeping, a faint humming came from outside her window. At first, she couldn't hear the noise as she lay sound asleep, but it soon became louder as it passed by her window, which was enough to disturb her from her slumber. Honkin keskale merkini seisu. HMPH? What's that? Cameron murmured to herself as she rolled onto her back. It took a second for her to register what she was hearing. At first, she thought it might have been Finn, but that all changed when she heard an older man's voice singing. Siumni sarisa salosa. What the fuck? She whispered as she bolted upright in bed, listening to the voice as it kept singing. Honkin velile sienteveselke, vilkuvi koitehen valosa. Cameron kept listening as she quietly got up and crept over to the bedroom door, quietly shutting it behind her as she walked down the hall towards Finn's room. Finn, she whispered loudly as her cousin woke up with a groan. What is it, Cam? He yawned as he sat upright as he looked at Cameron through his half-open eyes. There's someone walking around outside, she said as the pointed behind her. Finn was immediately wide awake as he got out of bed. Huh, what did you hear? I heard a man humming and singing outside of my window, Cameron said in a panicked voice as she looked behind her. Just as Finn stood up, the singing could now be faintly heard outside the window, much to his shock. Kakana korvesa kekernin kuku. Cameron pointed at the window and whispered, That's him. Finn held a hand up and listened to the man singing. Sulhansa sulauta ilista. Paymanen soitanto leitumen tilte antense corviini vilista. He walked to the closet and grabbed the closest thing he could find to a weapon, an old golf driver, and beckoned Cameron to get behind him. They crept down the hallway to the main living room. Finn quietly slid open the glass door of the cabin, the lights of the patio automatically turning on as they stepped outside. He stepped out barefoot onto the wooden deck, which felt cool underneath his feet. Cameron followed close behind, her arms wrapped around herself as she shivered from the cold. She was kicking herself for wearing just white shorts and a red tank top. As Finn looked around, he could hear the singing coming from the giant oak tree to his right. Hoi Larry la, the man's voice gently sang. That's when Cameron noticed something she hadn't picked up on before. The voice was singing in Finnish. Furthermore, the voice sounded familiar, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. Hello, Finn shouted as he approached the tree with the golf club raised. The light amount of dew on the grass was soaking his bare feet. As soon as Finn called out, the singing stopped. He told Cameron to wait as he circled around the tree, but there was no one there. We're not crazy, right? We both heard it, Cameron asked as her body shook from the cold. Finn walked up to her. Yep, I heard it too. What the fuck was that? I don't know, but it kind of scared the shit out of me," she said as she looked around the backyard before turning her attention back to Finn. "So what? We've got ghosts now on the property," he said with an uneasy laugh as Cameron giggled. "I sure hope not. But did you notice something unusual about the song?" Finn scratched his head as he thought about it. "Yeah, now that you mentioned it, the song sounded familiar." Then the realization hit him. Wait, it's the one that Grandpa used to sing to us when we were little. Yep, it was some old song that he learned from his parents. I recognized it when I heard Hoy Larry La, Cameron said excitedly. Suddenly, a breeze from off the lake hit them, and Cameron curled her arms around her chest. Ooh-oh, so Cece cold. Almost on instinct, Finn dropped the golf club to the ground, stepped forward, and wrapped his arms around her smaller form. Cameron immediately stopped, shivered, and relaxed. She felt warm and protected next to Finn, like nothing could ever hurt her as long as he was around. "Thanks, Finny," Cameron said in a quiet voice. Finn looked down and smiled at her. "Don't mention it. Can't be having you catch a cold before we go hiking tomorrow, can we?" Cameron shook her head. "No, we can't. Hee, you think Grandpa is watching out for us. Well, if we do indeed have ghosts on this property, you could do a lot worse than Grandpa Leroy." Finn chuckled as he held onto Cameron. She nodded her head. Makes sense that he'd stick around. Him and Grandma loved it here. As Cameron's ear was pressed against his chest, she could hear Finn's heart racing. She took a deep breath and asked, "Are you okay, Finny? I can hear your heart beating really fast." She heard him take a shallow breath and speak. "Oh no, of course not. That whole thing just got me spooked is all." Cameron broke the hug as they stood under the oak tree. The motion sensor lights on the patio had since shut off, which gave them an unobstructed view of the sea of stars that flooded the night sky. Millions of faint lights twinkled against the dark sky as they looked up in awe. "It's so beautiful up here. We don't get views like these in Minneapolis with the light pollution and all," Cameron said breathlessly. Finn smiled as he placed his hands on his hips and looked up. "Yep, and to think, I'll be seeing these on an almost daily basis from now on." A feeling of sadness overcame Cameron as she looked down at the ground and sighed. "Lucky, I have to go back to my job at the end of next week. I wish I could just say, fuck it all, and just move up here." "I'm sure you'll make it happen one day, Cam. Maybe you and I can be roommates," he laughed. As he said that, Cameron's body was overcome with a warming sensation. Like someone had wrapped her up in a warm blanket, and it felt oddly calming, almost assuring. "I'd love to take you up on that offer under the right circumstances, but..." Cameron then hesitated. Finn looked at her, but what? Cameron was about to ask what if he decided to meet someone down the road, but decided against it since she knew it was a sore topic for Finn. She instead shook her head. "Sorry, I lost my train of thought. I'm just tired. Let's head back inside." Finn checked one final time around the property to make sure there were no trespassers before heading back inside, making sure to lock all doors before going back to bed. Despite what had just transpired, they somehow quickly fell asleep, both thinking about the fond memories of their grandfather's song that had been almost lost to time. "Oh my God, my legs are killing me," Cameron groaned as she sat in the passenger seat of Finn's SUV. "What? You can handle a simple hike." Finn laughed as he drove down the two-lane road west back towards the cabin. Cameron brushed aside a strand of her wet blonde hair that clung to her forehead. "Simple my ass. When I walk for 5 miles, it's on a paved path, not on an actual mountain." Finn brushed off her comment. "It's just a series of hills. You want something that resembles an actual mountain around here. There's Eagle Mountain just outside of Lutzen." Hell no, I'll just stick with trails that don't have any elevation gain, she said as she rested her head against the back of the car seat. Finn shrugged. All right, suit yourself. The truck pulled off the main road and down a gravel road that ran parallel to blue pine like that was flanked on both sides by tall trees. Occasionally, they'd pass another cabin to the left while their cabin was located at the end of the long, winding road. After the truck pulled into the circular driveway of the cabin, Cameron stepped out and stretched her dirt-covered legs. The blue racerback tank top and black shorts she had worn were covered in sweat, and her white and red running shoes she had worn were caked in mud. Simply put, she felt gross. As she finished stretching, Finn got out of the car, took off the green sweat-soaked shirt he had worn, and placed it on the railing of the front porch of the cabin. As Cameron turned around, she let out a slight gasp. Finn's biceps were fairly large, and he had a decent amount of tone to his abdomen and broad chest. He was no bodybuilder, but the amount of lean muscle Finn had looked good on him, and even Cameron had to admit it. Finn then noticed Cameron looking at him and decided to crack a joke. Enjoying the show, Cam? She quickly shook her head in a panic. And no, I just was wondering what you were doing is all. Well, I felt kind of nasty wearing that shirt, so I took it off. I'll toss it in the wash here shortly. And besides, Finn suddenly flexed his biceps and struck a pose. The ladies can't resist the gun show. He finished his sentence with a wink. Cameron felt herself beginning to blush as laughed. Uh-huh. Okay, Mr. Olympia. Finn laughed along with her, making a terrible Arnold Schwarzenegger impression before they headed inside. While Finn went to his bedroom to go shower, Cameron sprinted to her room for a change of clothes before heading into the shower that was attached to the bedroom she was in. Placing her fresh clothes on the countertop next to the shower, Cameron stepped under the warm stream of water as it cascaded over her naked body. Grabbing her bottle of scented body wash, she squeezed it into the palm of her hand and rubbed it all over herself. As she lathered her smaller breasts, her fingers brushed against her erect pink nipples and goose-bumped skin before moving down her stomach, waist, and legs. As Cameron washed off the soap, her fingertips brushed against the small triangle of pubic hair. She traced her hands down to her pussy and found her clit. Figuring that it had been a couple of weeks since she had gotten herself off, Cameron reached up to the detachable shower and grabbed it. Sitting down on the tiled floor, she propped her back against the wall of the stall, changed the setting of the shower head to a more concentrated jet, aimed at it her pussy, and began to pinch her pink nipple with her other free hand. Cameron's eyes were closed as the warm stream of water assailed her clit. She tried to think about hookups and boyfriends she had in the past, but she couldn't get Finn out of her head. Seeing him without his shirt on had awoken something in her that she couldn't put her finger on. As the pressure from the shower head became more intense, she started thinking about what the rest of him looked like. The desire to know this was driving her wild. Ooh, Finny, Cameron softly whispered to herself as those intrusive thoughts flooded her mind. She knew it was extremely naughty to think of her cousin in that way, but the feelings that were washing over her were too strong to resist. Cameron spread her legs further apart as her fingers, and the jet from the shower worked in tandem with each other as she bit her lower lip and inhaled deeply through her nose. She pictured him going skinny, dipping off the end of their dock, beckoning her to come join him. The thought of his warm, toned body against hers as they embraced in the cold water was what ultimately drove her over the edge. Cameron's body shuddered as her legs locked up. As she climaxed, she dropped the shower head on the ground as her whole body went limp. Her head tilted slightly to the left as she breathed heavily, staring at the opposite wall as she processed what she had just done. Yet instead of feelings of shame or guilt, she felt content with herself, like it was meant to be. Regardless, Cameron chalked it up to being single for so long and slowly got to her feet. She dried off in front of the mirror and cleared the steam off the mirror with the towel and looked at herself. Cameron's breasts were a small B cup, but none of her ex-boyfriends ever complained. She ran her hands down her stomach, which had a small amount of fat from around her belly button to the top of her mons. She prided herself on exercising regularly, but she could never seem to get rid of her slightly rounded stomach. Her hips flared out lightly from her waist, and she looked at her naked self. Looking in the mirror, she quickly shook her head before putting her clothes on. There was no way that Finn would go for someone like herself, even if she weren't his cousin. As Cameron exited her bedroom, dressed in a pair of blue jean shorts and a navy blue Minnesota Twins t-shirt, she heard Finn call out to her from the end of the hallway leading upstairs. "Hey Cam, come check this out." She followed his voice and arrived in the attic of the cabin, which was just an upstairs den, complete with TV, couches, and a bar on the far end of the room. Next to the bar, there was an open doorway, which led to what used to be Grandpa Leroy's home office. After he was forced to retire from mining following surgery on his back in the late 1970s, him and his wife moved to the cabin permanently, where he would host fishing expeditions in the area, and the office is where he'd attend to business matters. Adorning the walls were photos of family, both old and new, along with several mounted fish that Grandpa Leroy had caught when he was still alive. Finn was sitting in a tall leather chair in front of an oak desk, which had a large PC tower and monitor next to it. He spun around and smiled at Cameron. "Cam, remember last night when we heard that singing outside?" he said excitedly. Cameron nodded. "Yeah, kind of hard to forget something like that, Finny. Why?" So, the motion-activated cameras that Grandpa installed a few years back caught something, and it got uploaded to his computer, Finn said as he pivoted back to the desk. Cameron looked over his shoulder at a window that was open on the desktop. It was a black-and-white image of the outside of the cabin taken the previous night. "Now check this out," Finn said as he clicked on the play button. The video started and was silent save for the sounds of some crickets off in the distance. Suddenly, the faint humming of a man could be heard clearly coming from the speakers. It was the same sounds as they had heard the night before. "Oh my God, Finny, wow," Cameron said as she gripped the top of the chair. Finn held his hand up. "That's not all, check this out." He opened another video file, which was a shot that was pointed towards the dock and oak tree in the backyard. A faint white, translucent figure could be seen walking alongside the house towards the lake. At the same time, the camera picked up on some singing. "Kakana korvisa kekernin kaku." The ghastly apparition continued walking towards the oak tree before it walked into the base of the trunk and vanished. A few seconds later, the patio light could be seen turning on, and out walked Cameron and Finn, who was holding up the golf driver. The video abruptly ended as Cameron stared wide-eyed at the monitor. "Okay, that was freaky. Definitely unusual, but I don't think it's anything we need to worry about." Finn shrugged as he turned to face her. Cameron wasn't so sure. "Finny, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure that was a ghost we caught on camera. I'm seriously freaking out right now." Finn, however, remained calm. "I agree with you that we did indeed catch a ghost on camera, but I don't think we have anything to fear. I think it's Grandpa Lear watching out for us." "I was seriously joking last night when I said that Grandpa was watching out for us. Do you seriously think it's him?" Cameron asked incredulously. Finn nodded. Call it a hunch, but yes, I do. He loved this place, and the fact that he'd stick around doesn't surprise me. Cameron rolled her eyes. Oh, really? And what makes you so sure that it's Grandpa and not someone else? Before Finn could respond, they heard a loud, slamming noise coming from downstairs. He jumped out of his seat while Cameron turned her head towards the doorway. You got to be kidding me, Cameron said apprehensively as she looked at Finn. Finn took a few steps towards the doorway, motioning with his hand for Cameron to get behind him. He stuck his head out into the den and shouted, "Hello, is anyone there?" There was no response. Finn turned around and motioned with his head to Cameron for her to follow. They quietly made their way downstairs and through the hallway leading to the downstairs living room area. Everything appeared to be normal so far. There was nothing that was knocked over or on the ground as far as they could see. Cameron then went into the kitchen to see if anything else was out of place, and that's when she noticed something on the dinner table. "Hey, Finny, there's a book on the table." He turned around and watched as Cameron picked up the book. It was dark green in color with a gold-colored frame with the words, "Family Memories," written in cursive on the front. As she opened it up, she noticed it wasn't a book at all. "This is a photo album. Where did it even come from?" Cameron looked back at Finn. He shrugged. "I don't know. I thought we cleared all of them out when Grandpa passed away." As she opened the front cover, her eyes became wide. "Oh my God, who is this?" Finn looked over her shoulder on the first page. It was an old black and white photograph that was faded. In it, a woman with light hair in a bun and wearing a long dress was looking slightly off to the side. Behind her was a man with his hand on her shoulder. He was wearing a dark-colored suit with a white shirt and black bow tie. His dark hair was neatly parted off to one side. Both had a subdued expression on their faces. It almost looked like they were both frowning. "Huh, those two look fun. I wonder who pissed in their cornflakes that morning." Finn mused as Cameron removed the photo from the plastic casing. Assuming this photo is more than 100 years old, photographs took a lot longer to take back at the turn of the century. That's why people look so bleh in all those old photos. Cameron stated as she flipped the picture. "Aha, I was right." On the back of the photo was cursive writing in faded black ink. "I know ya Animaja Jarvie, 1934, Bovey, Minnesota." Finn studied the photograph for a second before it clicked. "Whoa, I think these are Grandpa Leroy's parents, our great-grandparents." "Oh wow, I've never seen this photo before, but now that you mention it, I can see the resemblance," Cameron said excitedly as she looked at the picture. "You wanted to know if Grandpa Leroy was our spectral visitor. If this isn't proof enough it's him, I don't know what will change your mind." Finn joked. Cameron smiled wryly at him. Well, he could always manifest in the middle of our living room and start singing his songs again. No, I'd rather not." Finn shook his head. They shared a laugh as they sat down on the couch in the living room, placing the album on the coffee table in front of them. As they sat hunched over, they paged through the photograph. It was mostly old photos filed with people they didn't recognize. A few pages in, they came across a photo of the same woman from the first photograph with the same subdued expression, sitting in a chair holding a baby in her arms, with two little girls flanking her on both sides with mute expressions. Cameron removed the photo and flipped it over. There was more cursive writing on the back. "Animaja Johan Elena Ya Annika, 1941, Bovey, Minnesota." Cameron studied the photo, recalling the stories that Leroy told her. This must have been taken after Ino died in a mining accident. He told me that his mother was pregnant with him at the time of his father's passing. She never fully got over his death from what he told me. Yikes, that sucks. Still, how do you know this is Grandpa and his sisters? Their names were Leroy, Genevieve, and Doris, not Johann, Elena, and Annika. Finn asked her. Cameron laughed. Well, the trend among some immigrants back in the day was to give their kids the most American name possible. But Grandpa told me that their mom would address them by their middle names when they were at home. That's why Leroy is listed here as Johann. Finn nodded as he scratched his chin. Cameron continued flipping through pages until one caught her eye. She pulled out a black and white photo of their grandpa, who appeared to be in his early to mid-20s. His wavy brown hair was short, and he was wearing a white shirt tucked into a pair of high-waisted pants. He had a bright smile on his face as he had his arm around a woman with stick-straight blonde hair, wearing a long skirt that came up to her midsection and a dark, long-sleeved blouse. They were standing outside in front of a lake. Hey, that's Grandpa Lear and Grandma Dorothy. Finn laughed. Cameron nodded as she held the photo out before looking at her cousin. You look so much like him, she said excitedly. Finn looked at the picture and nodded in agreement. He had inherited his grandfather's diamond-shaped face and eyes, along with his wavy hair. Damn, he told me he was a lady killer when he was younger, but now that I've seen this photo, I believe it. Cameron giggled as they both admired the photo. That's when Finn noticed something else about their grandmother that Cameron hadn't picked up on. You know, you look exactly like Grandma Dorothy. I do not, she said in an almost offended voice. Finn grabbed the photo, faced it towards his, and held it up to Cameron's face, his eyes darting back and forth between the photo and his cousin. You've got her eyes, nose, and hair. Remember when your brothers used to tease you about being adopted? Well, do I have some bad news for them because you're a dead ringer for her? Finn joked as Cameron grabbed the photo from him and took a closer look at it. Her eyes scanned the photo, and the look on her face went from inquisitive to joy. Oh yeah, I do. Cameron saw how happy her grandparents were in that photo. So young, so happy. And they both looked so much alike. Suddenly, she got a lump in her throat as she thought more about this. If only she could find this kind of joy with someone special, but her mind kept going back to Finn. Why? At the same time, Finn let out a deep sigh as he stood up and looked at the picture with her. Cameron turned to him to see that he had a frown on his face. Are you okay, Finny? She asked him. He pursed his lips together, nodded his head, and got up. I'm good. I need to step outside for some fresh air, be right back. Finn walked over to the sliding glass door, opened it, and walked out to the dock. Cameron watched as he walked to the end of the dock, sat on the edge, and looked out at the calm blue lake. Cameron stood up and walked out to sit next to him. As soon as she stepped onto the dock, Finn looked over his shoulder briefly before turning his attention back to the lake. You know, you're a horrible liar, Finny, she said softly as she sat next to Finn, tears in his eyes, and he nodded. I know, he said in a stifled voice. Cameron reached out and grabbed his large hand. It's about her, isn't it? Is it that obvious? He laughed weakly as he wiped a tear from his eye. She nodded. Did something happen? Finn exhaled and looked down at the water beneath their feet. When I saw that photo, I was reminded of the joy that Grandma and Grandpa shared when they were alive. In that moment, I remembered that I'll never be able to share that with Megan. Or anyone for that matter. Cameron nodded and closed her eyes. It still hurts, doesn't it? Every morning, I check the Georgia Corrections Department website to see if that son of a bitch Micah Gomez is dead yet. Every time I check, he's still listed as imprisoned at Coastal Plains Federal Penitentiary. Finn said through gritted teeth. Cameron looked at him. She remembered the news reports she saw online of Micah laughing to himself as witness and victim testimony were being given in the courtroom. He was a man that clearly showed no remorse for his actions, and it wasn't surprising that Micah's behavior had left an impact on Finn. She placed a hand on Finn's shoulder. He's never getting out, and you know that. He's locked up for life, and you and Grandpa both helped see to that. Besides, him dying wouldn't bring Megan back. Finn hung his head down. I know that, but what pains me is that I'll never get to experience that happiness or joy with anyone ever again. He took all that away from me. What makes you so certain that you won't be able to feel any of that, Finny? Cameron softly asked him as she gently squeezed his hand. He shook his head. I don't want to say, Cam. It hurts just thinking about it. You can tell me, Finny. Remember, I'm here for you, no matter what. Cameron started choking back tears of her own. Seeing him like this hurt her in a way she never knew existed. She wanted to do everything she could to make him feel better. I just need a hug, Cam. I need someone to tell me that everything is going to be all right. Finn said as he teared up. Without saying anything, Cameron threw her arms around his chest and pressed her head against his shoulder. He wrapped his arms around her smaller body. It's going to be okay, Finny, I promise. Cameron sobbed as she took a deep breath through her nose. God, he smells amazing, she thought to herself. They pulled apart from each other as Cameron wiped her own tears with her forearm. Never be afraid to talk to me about stuff like this. Okay, Finny. He laughed softly as he rubbed his reddened eyes. I promise. They went back inside, looking over the rest of the photos. As they looked over the photos, Cameron looked at some of the pictures and made a mental note to herself. And just a touch of Thalia blonde to even things out. Cameron stood at her mounted easel on the patio of the backyard, palette in hand. As she put the finishing touches on the painting she had been working on for the past few days. She had been up for nearly 3 hours by this point, and Finn had not yet awoken despite it being close to 11:30 a.m. She set the palette down on a wooden stool and took a sip of her third cup of coffee. She had just set the mug down on the railing when she heard the sliding glass door open. I see someone is busy. Finn smiled as he walked out with a coffee mug of his own. Cameron nodded as she continued to paint. Yep, and I'm just about done too. As Finn started walking over to see what Cameron was painting, she held up her hand. You can wait. Finn laughed. Oh, come on, what's with all the secrecy? Superstition. I don't want anyone seeing my paintings until I'm finished with them, Cameron said in a matter-of-fact voice. As she continued to paint, Finn asked her a question. So, it's safe to assume that you've got some of your creative mojo back. This is the most I've seen you paint, well, ever. Something like that. Cameron giggled as she did a couple of circular motions with her brush. She set her palette and brush down, took a step back and folded her arms, her eyes boring into the painting. I suppose it's a start, she exhaled as she looked at Finn. All right, Finny, come over here and tell me how awful my painting looks. He stood up and walked over to Cameron. He was about to take a sip of his coffee when he lowered the mug from his lips. Cam, you said this was a start, if I'm not mistaken. Cameron looked at him confused. Yeah, why? The painting was a recreation of the portrait of Aino and his wife, Animaja. The background was a gradient light brown, and the chair which Animaja sat on was a dark brown color. Her red dress, blonde hair, and features were lovingly recreated in full color, along with Aino, whose bow tie was a light blue color, along with the same blank facial expression from the photo. In Finn's eyes, it looked true to life. Because this might be one of the best paintings I've ever seen, this belongs in an art gallery. Finn said with a huge grin on his face. Cameron blushed. You're just saying that to make me feel better. I don't think I'm good enough to be featured in one of those. Bullshit, Cam. You've done such an awesome job with this. Anyone who sees this and thinks this is amateur work is wrong and shouldn't be allowed in front of paintings ever again. Besides, you went to NYU. They don't just let anyone in there. Finn looked down on her. I don't know. It's just been so long since I've done a painting, and I think I have a long way to go before I can make something that looks professional. Cameron said nervously. You'll never know if you just keep it to yourself. You know, there's a local art gallery in downtown Corsica. I guarantee you that they'd love to have this in their exhibit since I know they're all about local heritage. Finn assured her. I don't know. Cameron's voice trailed off as she eyed her painting. She began thinking about having to return to her job in the Twin Cities in a few days. In fact, she wasn't even sure if she'd be able to make it back up to the cabin anytime soon. Come on, Cam, the worst they could say is no. Finn glanced at her as folded his arms. Cameron scoffed. Yeah, and tremendously hurt my ego in the process. Tell you what, why don't you take a picture of this painting and send it in an email to the gallery? Besides, you've been wanting to get back into painting for the longest time. Just do it. Finn encouraged her. Cameron looked at her painting for a moment before shrugging her shoulders. She took her phone out and snapped a photo of the painting. She then went to the gallery's website to grab their email address. As she typed furiously at her phone, she looked back at Finn. Hey, what should I say to them? I haven't exactly done this before. Just tell them you made this painting based on an old family photograph you found and that our great-grandparents settled in the area here. Keep it short but simple. Finn smiled at her. With a nod of acknowledgement, Cameron finished typing the email, gave it one final look, and hit the send button. She immediately placed her phone down on the wooden railing and exhaled. I can't believe I just did that. This is so unlike me. Would you rather spend your time painting and creating things you want, or would you rather make posters for dog shows? Finn joked. Cameron shoved his arm and laughed. Asshole, you promised me you wouldn't bring that up again. That's all I needed to know, Finn chuckled. They went inside and got dressed to head into Corsica, a town about 10 minutes south of where the cabin was, to buy some groceries for the next few days. As Cameron climbed into the passenger seat of Finn's SUV, she got an email notification on her phone. Holy shit, Finny, Cameron's voice was quivering. Finn looked over as he stuck the keys into the ignition. What's up? I just got a response from the gallery. The curator. He wants to see the painting in person. She continued to read the email. Finn smiled. That's awesome, Cam. See if he'll agree to meet with us today. We're headed to Corsica anyways, so might as well. I'll go grab the canvas from inside. The paint should be dry by now. Cameron hopped out of the car and got on the phone as she headed back inside. As she grabbed the canvas from the easel, the curator of the gallery answered, and Cameron asked if he was free this afternoon, to which he responded in affirmation. I have to say, Miss Birch, this painting is beautiful. The curator, who was a middle-aged man with brown hair, studied the canvas as he adjusted the horn-rimmed glasses that were perched on his nose. He then studied the photo which Cameron had used for the painting. And these folks are your great-grandparents. I have to say, you've captured their spirit wonderfully here. Cameron nodded as she stood next to the painting, her hands folded in front of her. Thank you, Mr. Braun. I'm glad you like it. The curator laughed. Please, call me Mark. I am not old enough to be considered a mister. Finn chucked at that remark as he watched Cameron. He made a joke. Yeah, come on, Cam. Get with the program. The three laughed and Cameron felt a sense of relief, before she spoke again. This is the first painting I've finished since I graduated from NYU a few years back. NYU, you went to Tisch? Mark asked her with a raised eyebrow. Cameron hummed. Yep. I even had my work featured at Eden Valley near Hudson Square when I was a senior. And what are you doing for work currently, Miss Birch? He stood upright and looked towards her. She looked down at the floor sheepishly. I currently work as a graphic designer at Invoke Creative Down in Minneapolis. I went to NYU to study painting and design, but sadly painting doesn't pay the bills, so I had to find work. I came up to my family's cabin to find that creative drive I had been missing, and well, this painting you see in front of you is me getting my proverbial mojo back. Mark leaned in closer to look at the painting once more before looking back at Cameron. Miss Birch, excuse my bluntness, but someone like you shouldn't be working as a graphic designer. You belong in front of an easel or sketchbook with painting and drawing utensils. I know, but I just don't have the time for it now. I'm headed back to Minneapolis this weekend and back to my job. I mean, it's not like my work isn't unfulfilling, but my most popular work was a poster for a dog show I did a couple years ago. It was something I slapped together in Photoshop over the course of one afternoon. I don't want to be known as the dog poster girl for the rest of my life, and I'm just stuck between a rock and a hard place. Cameron stammered as he felt a slight surge of anger build within her over her situation. Mark placed a finger on his chin and looked towards Finn. Have you told your girlfriend here how insanely talented she is? The remark took Finn by surprise and was about to correct him when Cameron responded. He tells me all the time. In fact, he was the one who encouraged me to show this painting to you. Cameron smiled warmly at her cousin as she felt her heart swell. Mark laughed. Well, that's how you know he's one of the good ones. You should consider yourself to be very lucky. He paused briefly before raising his finger. Tell you what, let me make a phone call. You two wait here. He turned on his heel and walked behind a door, which presumably led to his office. As the two cousins waited, Finn walked over to Cameron. So, why didn't you tell him that I wasn't your boyfriend? He asked. Cameron blushed. Oh, that was because I was nervous and caught off guard by what he said. Sorry, Finny, she said, not wanting to clue in Finn about her feelings towards him. As she looked at Finn, his face went from a bemused grin to that of disappointment. He looked at the ground, chuckled weakly, and spoke. I understand. This is new for you, so I get it. They were waiting in silence for a couple of minutes before the door at the far end of the room opened. Mark walked out with a huge grin on his face and walked excitedly towards them. Miss Birch, may I ask you a question? He asked Cameron. Of course, Cameron said as she held her breath. Mark glanced at the painting and gestured with his hand towards it. Would you be able to, under the right circumstances, be able to make more paintings of this caliber? I mean, I'd have to find some free time to do so, but yes, my job doesn't allow me much free time, sadly. Cameron shifted in place while Finn looked on. Mark smiled at her. Well, I just spoke to my wife, who is the director here, and well, we'd like you to come work for us. Cameron's jaw dropped, her eyes as big as the moon as she was processing all of this. I'm sorry, but did you say you want me to work for you? Of course. This area is known for its vibrant art scene, and we've just been given a grant by the state to expand our space. Since we're going to be taking on more artists, me and my wife would like to extend that offer to yourself. This place is by no means the Louvre, but we pay reasonably well, and you'll have all the time in the world to paint, draw, or sculpt whatever you want. He smiled brightly at her before he continued. In addition to that, my wife looked up some of your works that were featured in New York, and we both agree that you have a certain attention to detail that few possess. With all of that in mind, how would you like to be an assistant curator and a residential artist for this gallery? Cameron held her hand up as she took a seat. She had come to the gallery expecting a commission of a couple $100 at the very most, but getting offered a job on the spot was not something she had been expecting. For her, the choice was a no-brainer. Cameron stood up and folded her hands behind her back. "Mark, I accept. I knew there was a reason why I took the time off to come up here, and now I know why. I have no doubt you will be a great asset to this gallery." He then turned to Finn. "And you, my friend, have a very talented girlfriend. You should be very proud of her." Finn forced a smile. "Why, yes, sir, I am." Cameron, now too lost in the moment to correct Mark, didn't say a word as she blushed profusely. Cameron decided that she would submit her 2 weeks' notice upon returning to Minneapolis, and had informed her family that she would be staying at the cabin until she found permanent living accommodation. Afterwards, she and Finn purchased some groceries along with a fancy bottle of champagne to celebrate Cameron's new job. As they ate some steaks that Finn had cooked, she noticed that he had been rather quiet since they visited the gallery. "Hey, Finny, is everything okay?" She looked at him from across the table as he cut into his food. Finn shot his head up with a bewildered look on his face. What's up, Cam? Are you doing okay? You seem a bit, I dunno, out of it." Cameron looked at him as she took a sip of champagne from the flute glass. He pursed his lips and nodded gently. "Yeah, just tired today is all. Not sure why, but I'm probably going to call it early tonight. But hey, at least I get to spend more time with you when you return." He ended the statement with a weak laugh, which made Cameron feel a bit uneasy. Had she done something to offend him? They ate the rest of their dinner before they cleaned up the dishes and table. Afterwards, Finn bid Cameron a good night as he closed the door to his room, leaving her by herself in the living room. She had thrown on a white sweater that matched the shorts she was wearing for the sake of warmth. She was lying on the couch on her phone while a movie played in a background. As she placed the phone on her chest, she stared up at the ceiling and kept wondering what was going on with Finn. Had he been offended that Mark had mistaken them for boyfriend and girlfriend while they were at the gallery? She had thought this partially because she was nervous, but deep down, her feelings for Finn had become more than familial. The way he cared for her, his humor, his wisdom, his honesty. Finn had everything that Cameron looked for in a man, but he was her cousin, and there was no way he shared those same feelings. Cameron turned off the lamp, and her eyes became heavy as she found herself to be extremely tired suddenly, like she hadn't slept in ages. Try as she might, she couldn't resist the urge to fall asleep. Cameron found herself in the middle of the forest. The tall, imposing trees were shrouded in fog. She couldn't recall how she got here in the first place, and she looked around. Wasn't she just in the living room a bit ago? "Finny, where are you?" she shouted out before she placed a hand on her mouth. It sounded different, sounded younger. Cameron saw a puddle on the muddy path and got the shock of her life. She no longer looked like herself, as the reflection staring back at her was of when she was a young girl. The trademark twin ponytails she used to wear were draped over each of her shoulders, and a line of freckles arched over the bridge of her nose. She looked around in a panic and screamed out, "Finny, I need you. Where are you?" Her flight or fight instincts took over as she took off down the muddy path. How did all this happen? Cameron knew that this had to be a dream, but it felt so real. The chill in the air, the sound of the mud squelching under her boots as she tried to find someone who could help her. The path just kept going in a straight line, and the rows of trees seemed to stretch forever. Like she was caught in some never-ending loop. Cameron stopped running, out of breath as she looked around. She was lost. She was alone. She was scared. She needed help. She needed Finn. "Finny ye," Cameron screamed as loud as she could. She was trembling and on the verge of tears. Suddenly, she heard a young boy's voice call out from the fog, "Cammy." She recognized the voice instantly. It was Finn's, and he sounded just like he did when they were kids. Cameron bolted down the muddy path once more while screaming, "Finny, where are you?" "I'm over here, Cammy. Follow my voice," Finn shouted back to her. She continued to run as fast as her little legs could carry her before she ran out of breath once more. As her hands were on her knees, Cameron looked up and saw a figure running towards her. "Cammy, is that you?" The figure came into view. It was Finn, just as she remembered him when they were young. His wavy brown hair was a mess, and he had braces on his teeth. He was wearing the same last Airbender hoodie that he so very much loved when he was growing up. Cameron finally broke down in tears as she ran up to him. "Finny, I was so scared. I'm sorry for getting lost." "It's okay, Cammy. You're safe now. Come on, let's get back to the cabin before Mom and Dad find out." He wrapped his arms around her. Cameron woke up and her head shot up. She looked around and saw that she was still in the living room. The TV that she had been watching Netflix on had a message on the screen asking if she was still there. Her heart was racing as she sat upright. The dream felt so real, like she was actually lost in the woods. She looked at the ground and sighed. All her feelings for Finn that had been gradually building over the past couple of weeks were finally coming to a head. She needed to tell Finn how she felt, even though it scared her immensely just thinking about it. Standing up on shaky knees, Cameron quietly walked down the hallway until she was in front of Finn's door. She stared at the slab of wood in front of her, and taking a deep breath as she raised her right hand and balled it into a fist. However, before she could even knock, the door opened. Finn was standing before her wearing his night attire of gym shorts and a t-shirt. They looked at each other, not saying anything for a moment. Gathering all her courage, Cameron finally spoke in a soft voice. "Hey, Finny, couldn't sleep." He shook his head. "No, I can't. I've got a lot on my mind and, well, I need to get it out of my system." "Oh, that's also why I couldn't sleep either. Did you want to talk about it?" Cameron asked nervously as her bare foot dug into the carpet, her arms behind her back as she twisted in place. Finn nodded. "Yeah, mind if we go outside?" They sat on the wooden bench that their grandfather had built next to the dock. The evening air was brisk without being cold. It was the kind of night where one could leave the window open in their bedroom and not have to worry about freezing to death. Finn sat with his hands on his lap while Cameron was looking on. "So do you want to go first?" "Yeah, I'm going to lose my mind if I keep this to myself." He rubbed his face as he leaned forward. He took a deep breath and started to speak. "Remember when I said that I'll never have a chance ever again to experience the love and joy that Grandma and Grandpa shared?" Finn said as he looked up at the sky. Cameron nodded softly. "Yeah, I seem to recall something to that extent. Why?" "I wasn't being completely honest with you. The reason why I think that is because there is someone that I do feel that way about." His voice trailed off. "Oh, then why haven't you told her? I'm sure that whoever this girl is would be very happy to be with you." Cameron's heart was beating hard, and there was a pit in her stomach. She had been wrestling with her feelings for Finn, and she feared that he was about to admit to her that he wanted to be with another woman. "Because this girl I don't think she wants me, not like the way I want her. I could never have her, Cam." The streaks of tears on his face reflected the bright moonlight as he looked mournfully at her. Cameron swallowed as she reached out and grabbed his hand. What makes you so sure that she won't feel that way about you? Finn's voice was caught in his throat as he looked away from her. Trust me, she doesn't. Cameron needed to know who this mystery woman was, even if it meant having her heart broken. She needed to know not just for her sake, but for Finn's as well. You can tell me who she is, Finny. I won't be upset, I promise. Cameron whispered as she braced herself for the worst. He inhaled deeply through his nose and turned his head to her. Promise. Cameron nodded her head as her breathing became shallow. Back at the gallery, when Mark mistook us for boyfriend and girlfriend, I wasn't upset over the fact you didn't correct him. He looked away and stared back out at the lake. Her eyes became wide as she gripped his hand tighter. You weren't. No, I was upset because you're that girl, Cam. Finn looked at her in the eyes. The girl I'm talking about is you. I wanted what he said to be true. Cameron pressed her lips together as she felt a warming sensation in her chest, her eyes looking at Finn as he sputtered. She knew what needed to be done. I know how insane and wrong that sounds, but it pains me knowing that I can never have you. I'm so hopelessly in love with you. If that freaks you out and you want nothing to do with me. He was interrupted when Cameron pressed her lips against his own. She wrapped her arms around his neck, her lips finding Finn's as they collectively shared a groan. His hands gently rubbed the small of her back as he pulled her in closer. Finn finally broke the kiss, still holding onto her as he looked at her. Cam, he said as he breathed heavily in disbelief. Please tell me this is real. That you want me, Finny, Cameron said breathlessly as she looked at her cousin, tears welling up in her eyes. I meant every single word. He reached up and cupped her face. Cameron looked away. Are you sure? I know that you're still sad about losing Megan, and I don't think I look pretty like she did. A part of me will always love Megan, but now I realize that my heart belongs to you and you're here with me right now. Cam, nothing else can convince me otherwise. Besides, I've always thought you were beautiful, Finn smiled as he looked into her big blue eyes. Oh, Finny, she sobbed. They kissed softly once more in the moonlight, the sounds of crickets providing a chorus as the two lovers sat together on the bench. Don't ever shut me out like that again, she playfully said as she wiped a tear from Finn's face. He smiled. I won't, Cam, I promise. They laughed softly as they held onto each other. You know, it's been awfully lonely in my bed recently. Mind if I sleep with you, Finny? Cameron asked with a hopeful look in her eyes. Without saying a word, Finn put his right arm underneath Cameron's legs and his left arm behind her back, standing up as she held onto his neck for support. Carrying her small form in his arms, he pushed aside the sliding glass door with his foot and closed it behind him. They entered his bedroom, and Finn lay Cameron on his bed. She smiled at him as he took off his shirt. The sight of his bare, muscular chest made her pussy soak with anticipation. She sat upright on the bed, pulled off her white sweater, revealing a black tank top underneath. Cameron lay on her back once more as Finn crawled onto the bed until his face was hovering over her own. They once again pressed their lips together as her small hands ran along the sides of his bare chest. Cameron felt Finn's large hand go under her tank top, his fingertips brushing against her skin, which gave her goosebumps. Cameron broke off the kiss as she stopped Finn from going further. Giving him a loving look, she grabbed the bottom of her tank top and pulled it up and over her head, revealing her perky breasts to him. As Finn admired her rounded tits and erect pink nipples, Cameron whispered to him, "The girls need some attention." With a knowing nod, Finn leaned down and took one into his mouth. Cameron let out a faint gasp as she felt his tongue lash at her sensitive teat. Grabbing a handful of his hair, she threw her head back. "That's it, Finny. Suck my tits, baby," Cameron moaned as Finn moved to her other nipple. She looked up at the ceiling as a tingling sensation overtook her body. There was something different about Finn that made this all the more tantalizing for her. Meanwhile, Finn's hand moved underneath the waistband of her shorts and panties until his fingers grazed her pubic hair and hairless slit. Cameron's eyes shot open as she looked down at him. Finn removed his mouth from her nipple, breathing heavily as he gauged Cameron's reaction, almost as if to ask permission to continue. "Touch," Cameron said with a nod. "Okay." Finn smiled as his finger slid against the outer folds of her labia. She hissed through her teeth as she felt his slowly insert a finger inside of her wet pussy. "Ooh, Finny." Cameron's body seized up as she arched her back. She grasped his shoulders as moved his finger in and out of her cunt. His touch was magical. As he continued to finger her, Finn looked up at her and smiled. "Do you feel good, Cam?" "I love it, Finny," Cameron said through bated breath as he withdrew his finger from inside of her. Looking her in the eyes, Finn grabbed her shorts and panties and pulled them down her legs until they were completely off. Cameron blushed immensely as she lay naked and exposed before him. Finn drank in her form as he looked at her in awe. "Wow, you are so beautiful, Cameron," he said in a breathless voice. She looked up at him as she cupped her breasts. "Do you really mean that, Finny?" With a smirk on his face, Finn pulled down his shorts, and his cock sprang free from its confines. The long shaft stuck out from his body, and the cockhead was already leaking precum. He grabbed his shaft and began to slowly stroke himself. "How is this for an answer?" he said with a smirk. Cameron's throat went dry. It was easily the biggest cock she had ever seen, and it was all for her. Her pussy became even more soaked at the mere sight of it. She sat upright and beckoned Finn to come onto the bed. As he crawled in front of her, Cameron spread the lips of her pussy and licked her lips at him. She inserted a finger into her pussy and withdrew it. "You ready to fuck me, Finny? I've been waiting so long for this, and I need that big cock of yours inside of my tight pussy," Cameron said as she became overcome with lust. Finn suddenly seemed a bit apprehensive. "I want to make love to you so bad, Cam, but I just wanted to make sure that this is something you want. I've wanted you for so long, and I want to make sure this isn't a one-time thing." "Finny," Cameron was touched by Finn's words as she smiled at him. "I'm more than sure that I want this. You are everything I hope for in a partner, and so much more." "Okay." Finn breathed a sigh of relief as he grabbed the base of his shaft and ran the underside of it along her labia. Cameron let out a faint squeal as the sensation of his flesh on her wet sex. "Finny, don't tease me, please. Your wish is my command, my queen." He smiled as he pressed his glands against her entrance. Cameron let out a long moan as the tip of his cock and a couple inches of his shaft slid past her lips. "Ngggggghhh. Keep going," Cameron groaned loudly as Finn continued to slide into her. He finally bottomed out inside of her as his groin pressed against the underside of her ass. He then drew his hips back and began to fuck her. Yes, eyes. Fuck my pussy, Finny." Cameron closed her eyes as she felt Finn's cock penetrate deep inside of her. Finn leaned down, and they shared a kiss as he continued to move his hips. Their bodies rocking in synchrony on the bed as Cameron wrapped her legs around his waist. "I love you, Cam," he said as he broke off the kiss. Cameron, looking into his eyes, responded in earnest. "I love you too, Finny." She gasped as he continued to fill her up with his hard dick. As Cameron wrapped her arms around his shoulders, she got an idea. Patting his left shoulder with the palm of her hand, Finn stopped thrusting and looked at her. "Is everything okay?" he said with concern. Wrapping his arms and legs around him, Cameron whispered to him, "Roll over." With his dick still inside her, Finn rolled onto his back, taking Cameron with him until she was on top of him. "I prefer to be on top," Cameron said as she moved her hips up and down. Grabbing the sides of her waist, he looked up at her and smiled. "That's a pleasant surprise. I'll have to keep that in mind." Cameron giggled in response, before letting out a long moan as Finn met his thrusts with her movements. Oh Finny, fuck me." She bounced up and down as she impaled herself on Finn's cock. He pulled her down and they shared a fervid kiss. Finn looked into her eyes. "This is nice." "Moo, get used to it," she purred at him as he grabbed the sides of her ass and buried his fingers into her soft flesh. The bed rocked back and forth as Cameron continued to ride her newfound lover. The seeds of love that had been planted a couple of weeks back were now in full bloom as they made love in the dark room with the moonlight from outside faintly shining into the room. "Is it everything you hoped for?" Cameron teased him as she placed her small hands on his chest, moving her hips up and down as her tight pussy took in every inch of his hard cock. "Yes, fuck yes." Finn reached up and grabbed her breasts, teasing her erect pink nipples between his finger and thumb on each hand. Cameron ran her hands up his chest. "Do you like my boobs, Finny?" "They're perfect, Cam. I could get used to seeing them," he said breathlessly. She giggled. "Good, because you're going to be seeing them quite a bit from now on." They continued their tryst as they celebrated their love for each other in the most intimate way imaginable. At one point, Finn's finger brushed against her anus. He gently teased it with his finger, which caused Cameron to let out a teasing moan. "Hey now, who gave you permission to touch me there? You're so naughty, Finny." "You've got a nice ass, Cam. I want to explore every inch of you." Finn laughed faintly as he smiled at her. "Moo, you can count on it," Cameron said with heavy breath as she felt the tip of his cock bump repeatedly up against her cervix. After a few minutes, Finn eventually felt a stirring in his loins as he felt himself on the verge of coming, and Cameron could sense it. "How are you feeling, baby?" Cameron felt his thrusts becoming slow and more deliberate. Finn panted as he looked up at her. "I'm about to come." "Oh yeah," she giggled as she rolled her hips. "Well, don't hold back, Finny. Come inside of me." That's all he needed to hear as they moved in tandem with each other before he could take it any longer. With a couple of deep thrusts, Finn exploded inside of Cameron's pussy, who screamed out Finn's name as she experienced an orgasm of her own as well. "Finnyyyyyyyyyyy." Cameron's body shivered as she felt his warm spunk fill up her pussy to the brim. That paired with Finn's slow movements ultimately drove her over the edge. As they caught their breath, Cameron sat slumped on top of Finn, his cock still buried inside of her as she moaned softly to herself. "Oh shit, oh fuck, oh fuck." Summoning whatever strength she had left, Cameron, reluctantly, lifted herself off Finn's shaft and lay next to him, his cum leaking out of her pussy and into her inner thighs. Finn pulled the covers over them as Cameron rested her head on his chest. "You have no idea how long I've wanted you," Finn whispered into her ear as he stroked her blonde hair. She giggled as she faintly recalled the subtle glances that he would make at her when they were teenagers. There was some truth to his words. "Oh, I think I have a fairly good idea." Cameron pecked him on the lips as they laughed. As she rested her head back onto Finn's bare chest, he made a remark. "Well, this certainly is going to change things between us." "Oh yeah, for the better, I hope," Cameron yawned. Finn rested his head against her own as he felt the heavy grip of sleep begin to overtake him. Yeah, absolutely for the better. Good. Cameron's voice trailed off as they fell asleep in each other's arms. Cameron found herself standing on a wooden platform surrounded by a low, hanging fog over calm water. In fact, everything around her was foggy. She then noticed it wasn't a platform at all. Immediately, she knew where she was, the dock behind the cabin. Cam, a voice called from behind her, and she turned around. There was Finn, wearing jeans and a jacket as he looked at her in confusion. Finny, what's going on here? Why are we on the dock? Cameron walked up to him. Before he could respond, Finn noticed a faint silhouette standing with its back to them at the edge of the dock. Hey you, what are you doing here? Finn yelled as they approached the figure. As they got close, the figure became clear and turned towards them, and they stopped in their tracks. They knew who this was. Grandpa, Lear, what are you doing here? Cameron asked in shock. Dressed in his favorite pair of overalls and fisher's hat, a smile slowly came across his aged face as he raised his arm and pointed towards the lake. They watched as the fog dissipated until it was completely gone. A bright aurora borealis hung over the night sky. Dazzling lights of white and green danced against the backdrop of countless stars. As their eyes adjusted, they noticed that Leary was pointing at a small island out towards the middle of the lake. They both remembered that Lear would often take them there to eat lunch when they were younger. It then clicked for Cameron, wait, there's something on the island, isn't there? Lear gave a knowing nod and tapped his nose with his finger. X marks the spot. A loud whisper escaped his lips as the dream faded away. Cameron woke up, still resting against Finn's chest as she looked around the room. The morning sun was peering through the blinds of the room. As she looked around, Finn also woke up and let out a long yawn. Hey you, everything okay? I just had the weirdest dream. You were in it, and so was Grandpa Leroy. We were out on the dock. She mumbled as she stretched her arms. Finn shot a look at her. Funny, because I had a dream with both you and Grandpa Leroy, and we were all out on the dock. Cameron looked at him in disbelief. There was no way this was a mere coincidence. Did Grandpa Lear by chance point to the island in the middle of the lake? Finn's eyes became wide. X marks the spot. Shut up, Cameron looked at him incredulously. Finn shook his head. I'm dead serious, Cam. Cameron exhaled as she snuggled into Finn's bare chest. This was no doubt the doings of their grandfather. After a moment, she stood up, still very naked, and looked at him. How soon do you think you can get the boat running again? Thankfully, the motor only needed an oil change and some gasoline before it was seaworthy once more. After backing it into the lake with Finn's truck, the boat was ready to go, and they climbed aboard. At Cameron's insistence, Finn let her bring a couple of shovels from the garage. The pontoon glided across the lake as Finn sat in the driver's seat near the back of the craft. Cameron was sitting at the front of the pontoon on the red and white cushioned bench that was wrapped around the front of the craft. The wind was blowing through her hair as she looked for the small dock that they used to tie the craft up to. As they circled around the north side of the island, Cameron saw the small dock and pointed frantically at it as Finn took notice of it. He slowed the craft down, and it slowly pulled up next to the rickety old dock, still in the same worn-out shape as it was when they were kids. As Finn secured the boat to one of the struts, he remarked, "Somehow, this dock still looks just as old and worn out as when we were kids. I really hope that this can support our weight and having the boat tethered to it." "It'll be fine," Cameron said as she picked up the shovels and a green tote bag. "Besides, it's been a while since we've eaten here, and I'm looking forward to our picnic." "I really hope so," Finn said as he climbed onto the dock which, to his surprise, felt sturdy underneath his feet. They made their way up the dirt path to the western part of the island, where the wooden picnic table still sat on the flat rock, overlooking the lake after so many years. Guess there's some truth in the saying, the more things change, the more they stay the same after all. Finn said as Cameron placed the tote bag with their lunch on the table and the shovels on the ground. So do you want to eat first, or do you want to find this mysterious X that Grandpa Leroy told us about? She joked as Finn laughed. Well, it isn't too warm quite yet, so I guess we can see what we can find. With that, Cameron bent down and handed Finn a shovel while grabbing her own. All right, my intrepid explorer, lead the way. They spent about an hour walking around the island, trying to find anything resembling an X on the ground. An arrangement of rocks or branches, perhaps, but they had no luck. The temperature was starting to rise as the midday sun beat down on them, so they retreated to the picnic table to have lunch. Well, I guess whatever Grandpa wanted us to find here, he didn't want just anyone to stumble upon it. Finn ate a potato chip as he took a drink of water. Cameron laughed. Oh, come on. Where's that adventurous spirit? You're a rugged and handsome explorer looking for lost treasure, and you have a faithful companion to keep you motivated. As Finn rolled his eyes and laughed, something caught his eye. Behind Cameron and to the right were two hollowed-out tree trunks. They lay atop each other at a perpendicular angle, almost like a... Cam, look behind you. Finn pointed in the direction of the downed trees. Cameron turned around and looked at the trunks. The realization hit her immediately. Oh, you think that might be it, she said as she put down her sandwich and stood up. Bending down and grabbing the two shovels, he handed one to Cameron. Only one way to find out. Let's get digging. Sure enough, they found an exposed patch of dirt on the other side of the tree trunks. After digging for about a minute, Cameron's shovel encountered something metallic. The two cousins cleared the dirt, and the shape of a tan metallic box with a top handle came into view. Grabbing the handle and with a soft pull, the container came out of the ground. The wet dirt falling off the sides, and they carried it over to the table. Cameron cleared off the box with a rag that she had brought with them and set it onto the wooden surface. As they sat back down, Cameron finished off her sandwich as Finn studied container. This is like something out of some cheesy movie. I'm not dreaming or losing my mind, am I? Cameron giggled as she finished off her water bottle. Nope, you most certainly are not. Still, what did we end up finding? Well, we came all the way here to find out. Finn stood up and sat next to Cameron. Would you like to do the honors? Cameron laughed as she undid the rusty latches on the side and opened it. The lid of the metal box opened with a loud, rusty, screeching noise. It appeared to be empty at first, but then Finn noticed something in the box. Curious, he reached in and pulled out a small silver key, along with a faded green plastic keychain which simply read Northwood State Bank. 5. Underneath, it was a small, folded note that said, Ask for Dave Hagstrom. What is that? Cameron looked at the key dangling from Finn's hand. Finn set the key down and looked at it. That looks like it's for a safe deposit box. Northwood State Bank says to ask for Dave Hagstrom. Wait, I believe it's in town on Main Street. Cameron stood up, placed the papers and envelope into the metal box. Well, let's not waste any time. Still dressed in the outfits they wore to the island, they stepped into the lobby of the bank. A couple of tellers dressed in white company polo shirts were behind the line, and off to the side was the office of the branch manager, which was currently empty. Welcome in. How can I help you? The young female teller waved them down and they stepped up. Hi there, I was wondering if there was a man by the name of Dave Hagstrom here. Cameron asked the young woman. A loud, bellowing voice came from the right. That would be me. They turned and saw a tall man with slicked-back white hair, a bushy mustache, and black-rimmed glasses. He extended his hand to them. "Just call me Dave, and you both are." Cameron shook his hand. "My name is Cameron Birch, and this is Finley Jarvie." "Just Finn is fine, sir." Finn shook Dave's hand. A warm smile came across Dave's face. "Ah, Lear mentioned that you two would show up one day. Come with me to my office and we'll talk." Cameron and Finn sat across from Dave as he fired up his computer. "You know, Leroy would talk about you all the time." "You knew our grandfather?" Finn asked as he looked at him. Dave nodded. "He banked with us for close to 30 years. During that time, I really got to know him and your grandmother when they were both still alive. He also told me that you two were the best damn grandkids he could ask for." He then gestured to a photo on his desk. Dave was standing next to Leroy, each of them holding a large fish in both their hands. Not to mention that he was a damn good fishing guide. He chuckled as he folded his arms. "So, I take it your family is fighting over the property right now." "How exactly do you know that?" Cameron asked and tilted her head. Dave laughed. "Well, if you must know, Leroy told me that once he passed, everyone would be at each other's throats." Judging from his remarks and the gossip mill around town, turns out he was right. As the two cousins nodded, Dave asked them a question as he typed at his computer. "So, I take it that you found Leroy's safe deposit box key since you asked for me by name." Finn reached into the pocket of his shorts. "Yep, there was even a note with it to ask for you. He must have trusted you a lot. We were scared that you might not even be working here when we showed up." "I've been working for Northwoods for close to 30 years. Ain't no way you're going to get me to quit at this point. Now then, let's head on over to the walk-in safe. I believe Lear left you two a couple of things," Dave said with a wink as he stood up. Dave led them behind the iron-barred door into the surprisingly large safe deposit box room with a small metal table in the center. As Dave took out his key for the box, which was large, a gray metal door with the number 5 in solid black on it, Finn handed the key to Cameron. "I think it should be you who opens the door." "Ah, thanks." Cameron giggled as she inserted her key into the hole. Her and Dave both turned their respective keys, and the door slowly creaked open. Inside was a large brown leather briefcase that sat upright, and behind it was a heavy-duty red plastic box that was sealed against things like moisture. Cameron grabbed the briefcase, while Finn grabbed the container behind it, and they set them on the metal table in the center. Meanwhile, Dave informed them that he would be in his office if they needed help. The latches to the leather briefcase came undone as Cameron slowly opened it, and inside, on top of a bunch of folders and files, was a plain white envelope. "What's this now?" Cameron carefully opened the letter holder. Inside, it were 2 pieces of paper. The first was a letter, which they recognized the handwriting. "That's Grandpa Leroy's handwriting. What does it say?" Finn asked his cousin as she began to read the letter. As Cameron looked over the document, her mouth dropped and her eyes became wide. "The will of Leroy, Johann Jarvie. If you are reading this, then my time on this earth has come to an end. There were many important things I held near to my heart during my time on this earth, but none were more precious than my wife, family, and the cabin. The cabin was amongst my proudest achievements and served as a home for me and Dorothy when we retired, along with countless family gatherings. Though we loved our home on the lake, no one was more appreciative of it than my grandchildren, Cameron and Finley. From a young age, they bonded with each other over the wonder and beauty of the Northwoods and the majestic lake upon which this property sits. With this thought in mind, I can think of no one better to take over this property. Therefore, I bequeath all property rights for parcel number 105,384, located at 387 Escatola RD, Blue Pine Township, MN 55706, along with all personal assets to Cameron Victoria Birch and Finley Kevin Jarvie on the 25th of April 2019. Please know that your grandpa loves you both so much, and it is my sincerest hope that this cabin brings as much happiness and joy to you both as it did for me and your grandma. Love always, Leroy Johan Jarvie. P.S. Finn, please teach Cameron how to fish for me. On the bottom of the letter, next to Leroy's signature, was a notary stamp from the local county court. Cameron held back tears as she put a hand to her mouth. "Oh my God, Finny, the cabin is ours." "What do you mean?" Finn took the letter from her and read it. As he read over the letter, his jaw dropped. "No way." As her cousin read over the letter, Cameron unfolded the second piece of parchment, which was the deed for the cabin. "Wow, it's all here. Man, your parents are not going to be happy when they find this out." Finn laughed before he turned his attention to the second container. The latches on the box were more heavy-duty and took a good amount of effort to open. After a moment, he was able to successfully open up the container and the lid flung open. "Holy shit, Cam," Finn said in disbelief as he looked over the contents inside. Cameron looked over and her jaw dropped. "Oh my God, how much is that?" Numerous stacks of $100, $50, and $20 bills lay atop one another in neat piles. On the top of the stacks of cash was a large manila envelope secured shut by a red string in the center. As Finn undid the envelope, numerous savings bonds in various amounts spilled out onto the table. "I can't believe any of this. He left all of this for us." Cameron wrapped her arms around Finn as he placed an arm around her shoulder. "He really loved us, didn't he?" He responded as he planted a kiss on the top of her head. For Cameron, not only did this mean that she had a new place to call home, but also someone to share it with. Someone to build her life with. "Do you think that, Grandpa? He knew that this would happen." She looked up at him with hopeful eyes. Finn shrugged and smiled. "Who knows? All I know is that you and I aren't going anywhere." They shared a brief kiss before placing everything back in their respective containers and back into the lockbox, but removing a few bundles of $100 bills, along with the will and deed. After they locked it up, they went back to Dave's office. He looked at the two cousins and smiled. "Ah, done are we? Is there anything else I can help you out with?" Cameron and Finn nodded at each other before she turned to look at Dave. "Yes, me and Finn would like to open up an account here." "This is nice, Finny." Cameron cuddled up with Finn on the bench overlooking the lake. A dazzling green and white aurora borealis danced overhead against the starry night sky. Finn leaned in and kissed her forehead. "It is. I could get used to this." Carmen looked up at him and kissed him lovingly as her hand cupped his face. They pulled apart and looked at each other. "I'm never going to get tired of kissing you," she said to him. Finn shot a grin at her. "Neither am I." They sat in silence as they watched the light show above them. The water on the lake was still, and the only noise that could be heard was the faint sound of a single cricket and the fluttering noises of the aurora overhead. "So, how did your parents react when you told them about Grandpa's will?" Finn asked her. Cameron shook her head lightly. "Not good. Naturally, they think your parents somehow manipulated Grandpa into signing the property over to us. I've already contacted the county clerk to show them otherwise, along with the lawyer your parents are working with. I figured as much, but we have more than enough ammunition to prove to them otherwise if it comes down to it. And hey, my parents are excited that the cabin will now stay in the family." Finn ran his fingers through her hair as he looked out at the lake. Cameron giggled. "Yep, our cabin, our new home, Finny. That's going to take some getting used to." "I wouldn't have it any other way. I love you, Cam." Finn placed his head against hers as he let out a quiet sigh. She nestled up against him, grasped his big hand, and whispered, "I love you too, Finny, so much." They held each other close as the chapter of their old lives ended and a new one began. Their lives were now perfect, and they couldn't imagine a more fitting place to start than where they were right now. The revelation of virtually all the assets being under Cameron and Finn's name sent a shockwave throughout the family. Cameron's parents were certainly not happy with it, and even accused Finn's parents, aunts and uncles, of intentionally manipulating the will. But it was quickly disproven when the records pulled by the courts proved otherwise. Finn would spend the next few years working as a park ranger, enjoying every minute of it, before life took an interesting turn. Cameron's work at the art gallery would later gain her recognition regionally and, eventually, internationally. She and Finn would travel all over the world together for various art shows, but would always retreat to their lakeside getaway in northern Minnesota whenever they were back stateside. Eventually, after several years of gallivanting around the world, Cameron and Finn settled down at their cabin for good, with Cameron hosting artists at the Corsica Gallery, where she later became co-owner and head curator. Finn, following in Leroy's footsteps, restarted his grandfather's fishing guide business before he had to worry about spreadsheets and 12-hour workdays. Now the only thing he had to worry about was the large number of people who wanted to sign up for his fishing expeditions. They spent the rest of their days living at the cabin, and they couldn't imagine a more perfect life. Epilogue. "All right, inmates. Lights out." The bellowing voice of the prison guard called from outside the door as lights of the eastern wing of Coastal Plains Federal Penitentiary flicked off one by one. Micah Gomez lay on the bottom bunk of the cell that he shared with another man, Stephen Harris, who was in prison for armed robbery. His attorney had asked for maximum sentence of 20 years, but the DA who was overseeing the case wanted to make an example of Micah since he had been arrested for gun violence on numerous occasions before. The DA's intervention, paired with the pleas from the members of Megan and Finn's family during the victim statement, was enough to convince the judge who presided over the case to up the charges from manslaughter to murder. Even despite his failing health, Leroy had made the trip from Minnesota to Georgia for the sake of his grandson to deliver his own victim statement. So now here he was, locked up for life at Coastal Plains Supermax in the sweltering heart of Georgia, having recently celebrated his 5-year anniversary of being in prison. As Micah lay on his back, he closed his eyes as he tried to fall asleep, but to no avail due to his cellmate's loud snoring. "Motherfucker, I should just slit his fucking throat so I can get some sleep." Micah grumbled to himself as he clenched his fists together. Suddenly, he heard a man's voice call out to him, "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Micah's eyes shot open as he turned on his side to the left. Standing against the wall with his arms folded was an older man with thinning white hair, a pair of large aviator-style prescription glasses, a large green and gray plaid shirt, and a pair of baggy brown trousers held up by a pair of black suspenders. A smile crept onto his weathered face as he greeted Micah. "Hello there, Mr. Gomez. Do you remember me?" he asked in a thick Minnesotan accent. Micah's eyes narrowed as he slowly stood up. "I remember you. Because of you and that punk-ass grandson of yours, I'm now in here for life. You have a lot of balls showing up in my cell like this. I hope that shithead Finnegan, or whatever the fuck his name is, killed himself. But I'm not here to fight you. As for my grandson, he has found love again and is living a very fulfilling life. Lear laughed as he waved his hand. Suddenly, Micah's mind was flooded with images of Finn and Cameron. Cameron's first art exhibition at the Corsica Gallery, with Finn's arm wrapped around her shoulder as she spoke to a couple of guests. Finn and Cameron kissing as they stood atop the ridge of a Portuguese winery. The two cuddling on the couch as they watched TV at home. And finally, Finn down on one knee in front of the Eiffel Tower as he proposed to Cameron, who had a look of joy on her face. Micah snapped back to reality as he found himself inside of the jail cell that was now his home once more. As he stumbled briefly, he saw that Leroy was still in front of him with the same grin on his face. For the longest time, you were the source of my grandson's misery. The root cause, the alpha, the beginning, you will never have what he's got now. A meaningful life full of love and adventure while you rot away in this prison cell of yours. Leroy taunted Micah, who drew in a breath. You piece of shit. I ought to fuck you up right now for what you and that family of yours did to me. Micah clenched his fists. Leroy simply chuckled. You laughed as my grandson poured out his heart and soul into the courtroom and showed no remorse for your actions. You have no one to blame but yourself. Besides, you can't pick a fight with a dead man. We'll see about that, you punk-ass bitch. Micah drew his right arm back and threw a punch at Leroy. As his fist was about to connect to the center of Leroy's face, the old man seemingly vanished, and his fist instead collided against the brick wall with a loud cracking noise. Micah let out a loud cry of pain as he fell to his knees, a sharp, burning pain overtaking his now bruised knuckles and cascading up to his wrist. As he cursed loudly, Leroy reappeared in the doorway with a wide smile on his face. Ahaha, even after 5 years, you're still the same arrogant prick as you were before. Alla latvesta laho. Micah gripped his broken hand, his teeth locked into a gritted snarl as he slowly walked towards him. Hijo de puta, I'll fucking kill you. As this was happening, his cellmate, Stephen, had woken up and was utterly confused by what Micah was doing. Micah, who the fuck are you talking to? There ain't nobody there. To Micah, however, Leroy was standing in the doorway as he continued to mock him. Oh, just like how you killed Megan Rafferty. Her life came to an end because you couldn't let your pride go over this idea that another guy disrespected you. Tell me, Micah, was it worth it? Motherfucker, Micah screamed out as he closed in on the old man, but like before, Leroy vanished, and Micah instead slammed into the metal door of his cell. The loud bang it caused was enough to rouse the guards. Hey, what's going on up there? A faint voice from outside the cell door. Meanwhile, Stephen was trying to talk to Micah. Hey man, what the fuck's gotten into you? As Micah recomposed himself, he turned around and saw Leroy standing in the center of the room next to the bunk bed. He pointed his broken hand at the old man. He's right there. The old fucker who is the reason why I got put in here for life. Man, you're crazy. There's no one there. Cut that shit out before the guards come in here. Stephen yelled at him. Leroy mocked him as he placed his hands on his hips and shook his head. He can't see me, dumbass. Perkel, no wonder a moron like you had to rely on guns and weapons in your fights. You couldn't go toe-to-toe with me even if you tried. That shows me how weak and pathetic of a man you truly are. Micah saw red as he let out loud war cry, and he charged towards Leroy once more. He dove at Leroy, and like before, the old man disappeared. Since there was nothing there to break his fall, Micah tried to turn and catch himself on the ground. However, as he turned, the base of his skull and neck connected with the metal rim of the toilet seat, making a sick cracking noise as he felt his entire body go numb. His cellmate, Stephen, watched this all go down, much to his horror. Grahhhhh. Micah cried out as his body now lay limp on the floor like a discarded doll. His mouth now foaming with saliva, he lay there helplessly. Stephen shot up and ran to the metal door, pounding on it loudly as he got the guard's attention. "Hey, we need someone in here now." According to the patient, the ghost of Leary Jarvie, the man who issued a victim statement at his trial, showed up in his cell. During the supposed episode, he charged at who he thought was Leroy, and in the process, ended up breaking his neck against the toilet seat of his cell. The prison doctor explained to the warden as Micah lay on the hospital bed in a neck brace. The warden adjusted his glasses as he looked down at Micah. And he's got no documented history of manic episodes or anything of that sort. None whatsoever. The doctor shook her head as she looked over the clipboard in her hand. Just then, Micah made a noise through the oxygen mask that was strapped to his face. They looked at the now paralyzed inmate as he looked hopelessly up at them. That motherfucker, he was in the room. "I don't know what you saw, but the testimony from your cellmate says you got up and started acting all crazy. Plus, we were able to confirm that Leroy was not present in your cell. The man has been dead for well over 5 years now." The warden looked down at him. Micah looked at the warden. "I'm telling you, he was there," he said in a weak voice. "There's some additional paperwork that needs to be filled out. If you'll come with me, we can get it sorted out," the doctor said as she and the warden left the room. As soon as the door to the room closed, Leroy manifested at the foot of his bed with a smug look on his face. "Well now, isn't this an interesting predicament?" He laughed as Micah snarled at him. "Motherfucker, how could you do this? To me?" Leroy shook his head and folded his arms. "I didn't do any of this. This is all on you, buddy. Now then, since I've got all the time in the world, you and I are going to get to know each other quite well." Go away," Micah pleaded with the old man, but to no avail. "No can do there, pal. And besides, I've brought along a friend to make things a bit livelier." Suddenly, a woman walked through the wall to Micah's right. She had curly black hair and was holding a violin. It took a second for Micah to realize who this woman was, and his blood ran cold. It was Megan, the woman he had killed 6 years prior. "And no, Micah cried out as he watched Megan do a bow. "Hello, Micah, do you remember me?" the woman said in a mocking tone. Micah lightly shook his head. I'm sorry, please, go away." Megan, however, brushed him off. "No can do, Mr. Gomez. Since you killed me, I've had a lot of time to think about what you did to me, and while I forgive you, I don't forget." She finished her sentence with an evil smile as she held up the violin in her left hand. She continued, "Since I died, I've had a lot of time to practice the violin, and Lyra here has become my teacher of sorts. We've got some songs that we'd like to perform and would like to get your feedback on. I really hope you like Finnish folk songs, Mr. Gomez, because that's what you're going to be hearing all day and night. Megan and I have been practicing, and we need an audience to let us know how we're doing," Leary said as an accordion manifested in his hands. Micah's eyes darted between them. No, please. And just in case there was any doubt in your mind, we're going to be playing non-stop for as long as you still live. We're ghosts after all, so things like becoming tired no longer apply to us. Megan turned to look at Leroy. "Are you ready, Mr. Jarvie?" The old man nodded. "You betcha." Micah's breathing became heavy as he let out one final scream. Nuhuo. And a 1, and a 2, and A. Megan counted before she started playing her violin. Leroy began playing the accordion and started singing. I nuapurista kulusi palakantati, Jellicani pojuai kutkuti. Megan then joined in. Even aidi si titerer savati, von kilihen I eva senjut kutty. The music played on endlessly through the days and nights as Micah screamed out as loud as he could. His pleas for help falling on deaf ears as his agonizing new reality set in for him. Eventually, Micah's mind became fractured and broken, all while the joyous music of traditional Finnish songs assailed his senses for the rest of his days. Micah, already a prisoner in body, became a prisoner in his mind.